Calls for the CE to delay submitting political reform report to Beijing. Lawmakers approve funding to renovate Queen Mary Hospital. And Washington proposes measures to calm South China Sea tensions.
Good evening. With the government set to unveil its report on political reform on Tuesday, more than a dozen academics have called on the chief executive to delay submitting his report to Beijing. They believe that would give members of the public more time to address their differences. But as Rani Samtani tells us, the government is cool to the idea.
On Tuesday, Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam will unveil the results of the first stage of public consultation on political reform at the LegCo House Committee. And Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying is expected to submit his report to the National People's Congress Standing Committee this month. This would mean Beijing could be making decisions on constitutional development by the end of August at the earliest. A group of 13 scholars that had earlier submitted a reform proposal is now calling on the chief executive not to submit his report until October. The academics, including University of Hong Kong economics professor Richard Wong and local NPC deputy Priscilla Lau, said this will give the public more time to discuss the different options. Lau said if the report sets a framework and this framework clearly states what it will rule out, it will create more opposition and chaos. Executive Council member Fanny Law disagrees. She said submitting the report 2 months later won't make a difference. The sooner they draw up a legal framework, the faster we can focus on specific proposals and reach a consensus, Law said. Elsie Leung, deputy director of the Basic Law Committee, said the consultation on political reform has been going on for months, and the reform process should not be delayed any further. Lawmakers from across the political divide also waded in.
I don't think by delaying the presentation of the report by the Chief Executive C.Y. Leung to Beijing would help very much without a change of mind himself. People have already spoken. We have done whatever we can to express very clearly, vividly, what we want for Hong Kong. It's up to the Chief Executive. The ball is in his court.
To get consensus among parties from Hong Kong and from the mainland of China, you need to get understanding from each other much earlier, not avoiding it. The earlier you understand the differences, the better and the more possibility for you to narrow down the differences.
Leung stressed that the core issue right now is to find a consensus. Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam rejected calls for the CE to delay submitting his report, but she insisted the government will continue to listen to the public on political reform. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
In other local news, the LegCo Finance Committee today approved a number of government funding requests in its last meeting before the summer break. Among them, a plan to renovate Queen Mary Hospital. But more than a dozen items remain outstanding. Stephanie Choi has the story.
The Finance Committee approved 3 funding applications in the first of 4 sessions today, including a $130 million plan to develop manpower in the retail industry. And before the third session, Committee Chairman Ng Leung Sing called for cooperation from lawmakers.
I hope that we can finalize some more items in today's meeting. Our colleagues will cooperate to try to finalize the Queen Mary Hospital.
The committee approved 6 more funding applications in the third session, including an extra month's payment for welfare recipients and a 1-month rent waiver for public housing tenants. And lawmakers approved funding for a renovation plan for Queen Mary Hospital in the fourth session. The meeting was adjourned at around 6:40 this evening. Among the requests not examined that will have to wait, civil service pay rise and plans to expand the territory's 3 landfills and to build an incinerator. After the meeting, Ng said he was satisfied with today's proceedings as pro-establishment and pan-democratic lawmakers saw eye to eye on livelihood issues. Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
The United States is pushing for voluntary freeze on activities in the South China Sea. The aim is to avoid further aggravating territorial disputes and map out a long overdue code of conduct for the region. James Aiken with more.
For months, China and some of its smaller neighboring countries have been jostling for control of tiny islands and key resources in the South China Sea. In May, Beijing triggered an ongoing standoff with Vietnam when it deployed an oil rig close to the disputed Paracel Islands. The Philippines recently called for a moratorium on construction in the region after China began building a school in the Paracels to serve the children of military personnel. To help ease the tensions, Washington is proposing a voluntary freeze on activities like construction of new outposts and land reclamation. The intention is to build on a call for self-restraint contained in the Declaration of Conduct that was agreed to by ASEAN nations in 2002. The U.S. State Department was careful not to blame any single claimant in the region for the recent spike in tensions. But a senior official did criticize Beijing for what he called a pattern of provocative and unilateral behavior. China, which claims 90% of the South China Sea, continues to dismiss regional solutions. It argues its maritime and territorial claims have a historical basis and objects to what it considers interference from Washington. Meanwhile, the U.S. Defense Secretary has praised Japan's recent decision to begin exercising the right to collective self-defense by reinterpreting the country's constitution. Chuck Hagel made the remarks during a meeting with Japan's defense minister at the Pentagon.
This bold, historic landmark decision will enable Japan to significantly increase its contribution to regional and global security and expand its role on the world stage. Our government strongly supports the decision.
Hagel said the decision will allow the U.S. and Japan to raise their alliance to a new level. Tokyo is locked in a separate dispute with China over the Jiaoyu Islands, known as the Senkakus in Japan. James Aiken, TVB News.
A strong earthquake hit Japan's northern coast this morning, close to the nuclear power plant, crippled by the 2011 quake and tsunami. The 6.8 magnitude quake struck 10 kilometers below the sea surface off the coast of Fukushima. It triggered a small 20-centimeter tsunami. There were no reports of any major damage along the coast and no reports of irregularities at the damaged Fukushima Daiichi power plant. Evacuations were ordered in several coastal towns, but they were lifted 2 hours later.
The death toll in the Gaza Strip has topped 120 on the 5th day of Israeli airstrikes on the region. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected international calls for a ceasefire, and he's not ruling out a ground assault. Alan Buckner reports.
The night sky above Gaza City was filled with flashes of rockets as Israel continued to pound the Gaza Strip. And while Hamas militants have fired more than 600 rockets at Israel, there have been no deaths on that side, in large part because of a new Iron Dome air defense system that's intercepted more than 100 incoming projectiles. The Israeli army says it is targeting strongholds of Hamas, but most of the dead and injured are reported to be civilians, many of them children. The Palestinians are calling for a United Nations draft resolution that would condemn all violence against civilians in the conflict and call for an immediate ceasefire.
We would like an immediate intervention to put an end to this aggression. This is a military assault on a captive civilian population, basically, and the people who are killed are innocent civilians.
But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to press forward with a broad military offensive. He brushed aside a question about ceasefire efforts. He said the objective is to end the shelling from Hamas and restore quiet to the cities of Israel. The United States has so far backed Israel's actions. A White House spokesman said President Barack Obama phoned Netanyahu to reaffirm Israel's right to defend itself.
The other thing that the president communicated to Prime Minister Netanyahu was a willingness on the part of the United States to try to play a role in facilitating de-escalation of the violence there.
Alan Buckner, TVB News.
And still to come in our news tonight. US government lab mishandles bird flu samples. Cleveland fans celebrate the return of LeBron James. And spotting one of Chile's favorite sons on the streets of Santiago.
The World Cup final preview. Looking better than ever. Germany seem to have everything going for them. But Argentina have Messi, and that may be good enough to clinch the Golden Trophy. 2014 FIFA World Cup Brazil. Daily highlights. Tonight at 8 on Pearl.
Clarence 全新升級簽顏緊緻精華 V 臉型 V 雙盒 V 頸顎，嶄新3V 簽顏概念，塑造完美3V 立體輪廓，全新升級簽顏緊緻精華 Clarence。
Robin Hood here. I love giving away money. Wouldn't it be great to do it every day? With DirectAsia.com. You'll always get the best price guaranteed on car insurance every day of the week. How's that for giving back to the people? Oh, no. You're welcome. DirectAsia.com. Best price guaranteed on car insurance. Easy.
World Championship Boxing returns to Macau. Chinese national icon and twice Olympic gold medalist Zhou Shiming will fight on July 19 at the Venetian Macau Cotai Arena. Book now at CotaiTicketing.com.
Welcome back. More now on political reform. Democratic Party Chairwoman Emily Lau has also urged the government to give the people of Hong Kong some breathing space. That, she hopes, could raise the possibility of reaching a consensus on political reform. Speaking to TVB News today, the Democratic Party chairwoman voiced support for the suggestion for the chief executive to delay submitting his report to Beijing.
In the end, it may not work, but it may also work. So just give this place some time to breathe, to try to talk to each other, to reach a consensus. And if that fails, what have you got to lose? You may say, oh, that's impossible. Well, I guess in politics, nothing is impossible. It's very difficult, but we owe it to all the Hong Kong people and the future generation to try.
After Beijing released a controversial white paper on the governance of the SAR, the Democratic Party turned down a meeting with the central government's liaison office. But Lau denied her party is refusing to communicate.
I think there's nothing to talk about, because the Chinese government officials give everybody the impression that they are very intransigent. Okay, you can talk to them, but they will recite you all what they've said in the last few months. That will make the discussion futile.
Lau said Beijing needs to stop taking a hard line against those who are simply concerned that future chief executives will end up being chosen through another version of small-circle elections. And she chided the chief executive for being as receptive to public opinion as a wall, echoing worries that next week's consultation results would indicate a move towards universal suffrage that doesn't meet international standards. As for Occupy Central, Lau said her party will not take the lead, but will work closely with organisers of the movement. Meanwhile, rural leader Lau Wong-Fat said today he has joined the Alliance for Peace and Democracy, which opposes Occupy Central. He called on his fellow villagers to join a signature petition that will be held by the alliance next week. Lau reiterated his support for implementing universal suffrage according to the Basic Law and relevant NPC decisions, while condemning the proposed civil disobedience movement for encouraging illegal acts.
Disagreements over quarantine measures are preventing a resumption of live poultry supply from across the border. As Jonathan Lee reports,